They told us to wear black. So I did. But no one mentioned how black turns gray when your only good shoes are 3 years old and the heels make that soft, apologetic squeak with every step. I had on my brother's old jacket. It was oversized, wool, with a button missing, and I kept fiddling with the safety pin I'd added where the button used to be. It wasn't for fashion. I liked the way it clicked against the fabric. It gave me something to touch when my hands didn't know what else to do. My ID badge hung crooked around my neck. I'd checked it 4 times in the bathroom mirror before coming in. My name looked too big on it, like it didn't belong to me. I walked with my head slightly tilted, not out of habit, but because it helped cover the faint scar just under my left eye. People never noticed it if I angled right. First day of the internship, I wasn't scared of failure. I was scared of being seen trying. No one looked up when I walked in. The front desk guy asked me for my name again, even though I'd introduced myself twice yesterday during onboarding. I smiled like it didn't sting and pointed to my badge. He nodded, didn't really look. The office smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. People moved fast headphones in, eyes locked on monitors, fingers flying. There was a rhythm to it all, like a song I hadn't learned the beat to yet. They gave me a desk by the window, but the blinds were shut tight, and I didn't want to be the intern who opened them. I sat down, logged in, and stared at a folder titled Unsorted B-Roll, 2007 to 2014. By lunch, no one had spoken to me. Not really. Just a few dry instructions and a sticky note that said, "Please label clearly." I ate in the supply closet, not because I had to, because no one would notice if I did. It was just another day, which for someone like me was both a relief and a little heartbreaking. I wasn't supposed to be in that elevator, but someone had spilled coffee on the stairs, and I didn't want to slip. So I took the lift, clutching my Tupperware like a shield. I meant to press 2 editing bay. My finger hit 5 instead. The doors opened to silence. Not the kind of quiet you get in libraries. This was heavier, intentional. The hallway smelled like cedar and money. The walls were lined with black and white photographs of strangers winning awards. No one else was around. Just that kind of cold lighting that makes everything feel more expensive than it really is. I stepped out before I realized why I shouldn't have. The plaque on the glass door said it all. Executive Studio. Private sessions only. I froze. Through the frosted panel, I saw silhouettes too. Maybe 3 people. Someone turned toward the door. I backed up, hit the wall behind me. The elevator hadn't closed yet. A part of me knew I should have gotten back in, but another part, some strange part, made me stay still, like I was waiting for something I couldn't name. The door opened. Not fully. Just enough for the conversation to slip out low voices, calm but clipped. The kind of tone people used when money was involved and time was tight. Inside, it wasn't a boardroom like in movies. No long table, no suits. Just a tall man in jeans and a gray Henley, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the monitor playing muted footage of a protest in black and white. He didn't look over right away, but when he did, he didn't flinch. He didn't wave me off or ask what I was doing there. He just stared. A long, unreadable kind of look, like he was scanning something invisible on my face. I stood frozen, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. A woman in a headset turned and whispered, "This is a closed floor." But before I could apologize, the man nodded once toward her and said, "She's fine." Like I was meant to be there. Like I wasn't a mistake. I stepped back as the door closed, but that look, his look, stayed with me. Something about it made my heart quiet down for the first time all day. The next morning, my name was on the call sheet. It shouldn't have been. Interns didn't get assigned to production meetings, especially not ones they walked into by accident. Still, there it was. My name, in lowercase, like it didn't want to take up too much space. The meeting was in the same room. When I walked in, he was already there. Same shirt, same calm, same unreadable stare. I stood awkwardly near the corner, unsure if I should sit. Then he said it, just loud enough for the room to hear. "Not lost, just early." A few people laughed. I didn't. Because the way he said it wasn't a joke. It wasn't to fill space. It was like a quiet permission. Like he'd seen right through the panic in my chest and decided I didn't have to carry it alone. I got the email around 7:14 p.m. The office was already empty. The overhead lights had flickered off, leaving only the glow of my monitor and the humming sound of the ancient hard drive I'd been feeding footage into all day. Subject line, 1976 footage. Source, no greeting, no signature, just one sentence. Clip labeled Strike Denver 1976 Final Move. Where did you pull it from? I blinked. It was the man from the glass room. I didn't even know his full name until I hovered over the sender. Marcus Hale, Creative Director. I reread the message 3 times before typing back. Short, factual. Found in untagged B-roll folder, dated pre-1980, likely mislabeled, recovered from old Betacam tape, can resend with metadata if needed. 30 seconds later, he replied, "Send it. Good find." That was it. No exclamation mark, no thank you. But my heart did this strange skip anyway. He hadn't copied anyone. He hadn't asked someone else. He asked me. That night, I replayed those 2 words, "good find," over and over, like a song only I was allowed to hear. 2 days later, I was in the records library. It was the quietest room in the building. Smelled like dust and forgotten things. I liked it there. No one ever looked over your shoulder in a room full of shelves. I was scanning old footage logs when I felt someone step into the aisle behind me. I turned. It was him. No clipboard, no assistant. Just Marcus, holding a small reel in one hand and an untouched coffee in the other. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at the screen behind me, then back at me. "What you're doing with those tapes," he said, voice steady. "That's the kind of thing people overlook until it saves them." He didn't smile, but he didn't need to. It wasn't flattery. It felt more like recognition. Then he handed me the reel. "Found this buried in a cabinet upstairs. No label. Figured you'd know what to do with it." And just like that, he was gone. But that moment, the pause before he walked away, said something more than his words ever could. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the reel, not the words. Just the way he looked at me, like I was supposed to be there. Like I knew something worth listening to. But I didn't. Not really. I was an intern who got in by accident, who still Googled basic terms during meetings and ate lunch with my headphones in just to avoid making conversation. I kept wondering, had I imagined it? Had I just read too much into a pause? A nod? A 2-line email? Maybe he treated everyone like that. Maybe I was just desperate to matter to someone who clearly did. That night, I opened my laptop and reread the message again. "Good find." 2 words, nothing more. But somehow, they sat heavier on the screen than anything else in my inbox. I turned off the light and lay in bed, my fingers still brushing the corner of my badge on the nightstand. The weight of being noticed felt a lot like carrying something I wasn't sure I'd earned, and it wouldn't let me sleep. It started small. The sideways glances, the pause when my name was mentioned, the way someone would reread an email twice if I was copied. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being too sensitive, until one afternoon in a post-production sync, a senior editor graying, sharp-tongued tilted her glasses down and asked, "You're with which department again?" Before I could answer, someone mumbled, "She's the intern Marcus keeps pulling into meetings." That hung in the air too long. No one laughed. No one defended me either. Later, in the kitchen, a sound engineer I hadn't met before passed by and said, "So you're the lucky intern." It wasn't mean, but it wasn't kind, like I had skipped a step, like I was someone's shortcut. And the worst part? I didn't blame them, because I didn't know why I was being pulled into those rooms either. I hadn't earned anything yet. I'd just shown up in the wrong place at the right time. Or maybe the wrong one. That night, I found myself walking slower through the halls, eyes down, hands in pockets, just in case someone asked me again what I was doing here, because I still didn't have a good answer. The meeting room felt colder that day. Maybe it was the AC, maybe it was the pressure. I'd been told to sit in, nothing more. Observe, take notes, stay quiet. Then, halfway through the session, Marcus looked up from a stack of shot logs, tapped his pen twice, and said, "Ellie, you reviewed the 1995 factory fire segment. Thoughts?" The room turned toward me like it had one pair of eyes. My throat locked. I hadn't even opened my notebook yet. I wanted to say something smart, precise, useful. Instead, what came out was shaky. I noticed a continuity mismatch in the time codes. The footage cuts from early evening to pre-dawn without transition. Silence. Then Marcus nodded. "That's accurate. Keep going." Keep going? I glanced down at my notes, just scribbles and crossed-out sentences. But I kept talking. About frame integrity, about the missing sound beds, about how survivor interviews deserved clean pacing. It wasn't perfect. I tripped over 3 words, lost my place once. But no one interrupted. And Marcus. He watched me the whole time, not judging, just steady. When I finally stopped, no one clapped, no one complimented me, but no one questioned why I was there either, and that, somehow, felt like enough. 2 days later, they let me speak again. Same room, same faces. This time I came prepared pages of notes, timestamps, color-coded tabs. I'd practiced what to say, rehearsed the tone, even the pauses, but nerves don't care about rehearsals. When my turn came, I misspoke, called a survivor by the wrong name. A small, stupid mistake, one I couldn't take back once it was out. Someone shifted in their chair. Another cleared their throat. I felt my ears burn. The page in front of me blurred. Marcus didn't flinch. He leaned forward slightly and said, "That's understandable. The file was mislabeled. It's been corrected." No scolding, no tension. Just that calm, even voice. The kind that doesn't shield you from consequence, but doesn't let you drown in it either. I corrected myself, quietly, then kept going. After the meeting, no one brought it up, but as I packed my things, I noticed something on the table where Marcus had been sitting. The folder he'd carried in my notes were inside. He'd brought them with him, and somehow that said more than any apology ever could. On my way out, I passed the glass door again. Same hallway, same reflection. But this time, I didn't look away. I saw myself, hair slightly undone, papers hugged close, lips pressed tight like I was still holding in breath. And yet, something had shifted. I didn't look invisible. I didn't look like someone who was pretending to belong, just someone who was trying. And for the first time, I didn't hate that version of me. It was supposed to be routine. I was digging through mislabeled footage logs from the late 90s, reorganizing tapes for cold storage. Nothing glamorous. One of the cardboard boxes at the back of the archive shelf had no label. Just dust and the faint smell of mildew. I almost didn't open it. Inside were a dozen paper folders, handwritten notes, photos taped with yellowing scotch. No digital backup, no barcode. I flipped through slowly, careful not to tear anything. One file stopped me cold. Patient name, redacted. Age, 10. Injury, 3rd-degree burns across 60% of body. Date, July 1999. There were black and white photos, hospital sketches, treatment records, notes from a pediatric therapist. Subject struggles with touch. Eyes alert but withdrawn, avoids mirrors. No release form. No interview permissions. Just silence. Like someone had tried to forget the story existed. But someone had once cared enough to document it, even if only in pencil. The last page was blank, except for one line in faded ink. She asked if anyone would still love her with her face like this. I stared at it for a long time, long enough to forget where I was, long enough for something inside me to feel strangely, deeply familiar. I tried to log the file. It should have been simple: scan the barcode, match it to an existing case, file it under Historical Archive. But there was no barcode. I entered the patient code manually. Nothing. No match, no digital file, no index entry, not even a redacted listing. It was like she never existed. That doesn't happen here. Even the oldest tapes had backup logs. Even footage we weren't allowed to show had clearance trails. But this girl, this file, was a ghost. I brought it up to the tech librarian, casually, asked if maybe there'd been a data transfer loss from the 90s. He shook his head. The 99 batch? That year's airtight. We even double-backed it after the fire scare in 2008. I nodded like it made sense, but it didn't. Someone had chosen to bury this, and the question that haunted me more than why was who. I didn't plan to bring it up, but the folder stayed in my bag for 3 days. I couldn't let it go. Not because I was curious, because it felt wrong to carry a story that didn't belong to me. Friday evening, almost everyone had left. I stayed late to recheck some transfer logs, hoping the silence would help me stop thinking. I didn't hear him walk in. Marcus stood near the editing bay, reviewing footage alone. I hadn't seen him that still before. Like his body was there, but his mind was far away. I hesitated, then walked over. I found a file in storage, I said quietly. Burn victim, July 99. Girl, no digital match. He didn't respond right away. Then he said, without looking up, there wouldn't be. I waited. She was mine, he said finally. The room didn't move. Neither did I. We never released the story. She didn't want cameras. She wanted privacy. but I kept a record. I thought maybe someday. His voice didn't crack, but something in it bent a little. I nodded, said nothing else. He didn't thank me. I didn't expect him to. Some truths don't need reaction, just a place to exist. And in that moment, I think we both understood that silence was its own kind of trust. That night, I sat at my desk long after the building emptied. The folder was in front of me, closed, heavy. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened a blank document and typed 2 words at the top. Phoenix Archive. Not a title. Not yet. Just a question, really. What if stories like hers didn't have to stay buried? What if healing didn't mean hiding? I pitched it in the weekly development meeting. The room was full directors, producers, 2 editors, and a medical consultant from the burn trauma unit who barely glanced up from his phone. I walked them through the draft. A digital archive dedicated to untold stories from patients who refused the spotlight. Raw footage, voice-only narratives, even handwritten entries. A living record for the ones who never got aired. Marcus sat quietly at the far end. He didn't introduce me, didn't interfere. When I finished, there was a pause. Then Dr. Lin, the consultant, spoke. "We don't hire feelings," he said flatly. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He looked up. "This isn't therapy, it's production. We air what the audience can digest, not trauma diaries. If they didn't sign consent back then, there's a reason." A few people nodded. Others looked away. I felt the folder in my lap, my fingers curled around its edge like it could hold me up. Before I could speak again, Marcus cleared his throat. "Let her finish," he said. Lynn raised an eyebrow. "There's nothing new here, just more emotional liability." That word liability landed harder than it should have. I left the meeting holding my own breath, and the quiet in the hallway afterward felt colder than any room I'd ever walked through. I didn't cry. That's what I kept telling myself as I gathered my things. I moved slowly, careful not to let the papers rustle too loud, like even the sound of disappointment needed to stay polite. No one stopped me. No one said good job. Not even a, "Hey, don't take it personally." The folder with Phoenix Archive, written in pencil, sat at the bottom of my tote bag, unread, unmentioned. As I stepped out of the room, I heard them move on. New topic, new footage, like I'd never spoken at all. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, eyes on the scuffed tile floor, the kind that never looked clean, no matter how many times it was mopped. I wanted to disappear, or shrink down into the stitching of my jacket, be something no one had to argue with. For all the times I'd feared being invisible, this was worse, because now I had dared to be seen. And they had decided they didn't want to look. I didn't mean to linger, but my notebook had slipped under the table, and by the time I bent to grab it, the meeting had resumed. I heard Marcus speak. "She doesn't need protection," he said, voice steady. "She just needs a shot." There was a pause, then the soft scrape of someone shifting in their seat. "She sees things most people overlook," he added. "That matters." I stayed frozen in the hallway, notebook clutched tight, heartbeat louder than I wanted it to be. He hadn't said it to me. He didn't even know I was still there. But somehow that made it feel even more real, because belief, when said behind closed doors. That's the kind that sticks. That weekend I came in early. No lights, no chatter. Just the hum of the archive server and the soft clack of keys under my fingers. I opened a new project file and titled it Phoenix 0. Not for submission, just to see if I could make it real. I pulled 3 audio clips, unreleased interviews from patients who'd opted out of the final cut. Their voices were shaky, unpolished, but they were human in a way our polished docs never were. I layered static, faded photographs, even pencil sketches scanned from intake folders. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good. But it was something. No one had asked me to do this. No one had greenlit anything. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I needed permission. This story didn't have to be loud. It just had to be true. Monday morning, I was asked to show what I'd been playing with. Nothing official. Just a few junior editors and one of the assistant producers. Casual, low stakes. I told myself it didn't matter. Still, my hands shook as I plugged in the HDMI. The room dimmed, and the first slide came on. A black screen, then the sound of someone breathing, slowly, through the edge of tears. The second slide. A faded photo of burned hands wrapped in gauze. A voice followed, cracked, soft, real. They told me I should be grateful I survived. I was, but I also wanted someone to ask if I was okay. No one spoke. Midway through the 4th slide, I reached up to tuck my hair behind my ear. It was a reflex. I didn't think. And just like that, the scar was visible. That pale ridge beneath my left eye, the one I'd trained myself to hide with angles and bangs and careful lighting. I kept going. My voice faltered once. I didn't stop. When the slides ended, the room was quiet. Not cold, not dismissive, just quiet in the way people are when something lands somewhere unexpected. I closed the laptop, heart pounding. I hadn't planned to show my scar. But maybe it had always been part of the story I was trying to tell. No one moved. The kind of stillness that feels louder than words. I looked at the screen, then at the table, anywhere but at them. I could feel the scar stretching slightly as my jaw clenched. Maybe I'd ruined it. Maybe showing too much made it about me instead of the work. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table, pressing until my knuckles went white. One of the editors shifted in his chair, but didn't speak. The producer just stared at the dark screen like it was still glowing. I waited for someone to clear their throat, crack a joke, change the subject. But no one did. And that 1 second of silence held longer than any applause I'd ever imagined. I was still standing by the projector, trying to gather the cords with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Then I saw him. Marcus had entered sometime during the last slide. I hadn't noticed. But now he was walking toward me, slow, quiet, unreadable as always. He didn't say anything. He reached out, gently adjusted the mic clip to my collar. It had slipped sideways. His hand brushed my cheek. Just barely, right across the scar. Not a pause, not a flinch, just presence. He fixed the mic, then looked at me, not with approval, not with pity, with something steadier, something more like belief. Then he nodded once. That was it. No speech, no correction. just a silent acknowledgement that he'd seen everything and wasn't turning away. And in that small gesture, I felt my lungs finally release the air I didn't know I'd been holding. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than usual. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, too harsh, too honest. My reflection looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from trying too hard not to take up space. I reached for the comb, ready to sweep my hair forward like always. But then I stopped. The scar wasn't big, faint, almost easy to miss unless you knew it was there. But I knew, and I'd spent years treating it like a mistake I had to manage. I set the comb down. For the first time, I didn't adjust anything, didn't angle my face, didn't tug the strands across like a curtain. The launch for the Phoenix prototype was in 2 days, and when I stepped up to speak, I decided I would let them see all of me. No retouching, no camera tricks, no edits. Just the truth as it was. Scar and all. The room wasn't huge, but it felt full. Producers, interns, donors in smart jackets. A few local reporters milled near the coffee cart, whispering names and checking badge titles. Someone had hung a simple banner on the wall behind the screen. Phoenix Archive, stories that stayed behind. I stood near the side, watching the seats fill. My name wasn't on the program. It didn't need to be. This wasn't about me. It was about the voices in the reel. The ones who spoke even when their names weren't remembered. The ones we'd cut from final edits because their scars made executives nervous. Marcus stood across the room, speaking quietly with someone from public radio. When he glanced over, his expression didn't change, but he gave a small nod. Just once. That was enough. When they dimmed the lights, I moved to the console. I pressed play. The room filled with static first, then voices. Unpolished, raw, untrained. A woman laughing through tears. A man describing the smell of hospital soap. A teenager saying, "I never told anyone what it felt like to be looked at and still feel invisible." The silence after the last clip was long, but no one shifted. No one coughed or tapped a phone. They just sat in it, held it. And in that stillness, I felt something settle inside me. The story had been told. And for once, they listened. After the crowd thinned and the screen went dark, I returned to my desk. A plain envelope sat on my keyboard. No name, no note. Inside was a small silver pin shaped like a feather. Delicate, slightly curved, phoenix-like. The kind you'd miss unless you looked closely. I turned it over in my hand, waiting for the catch. Some logo, some branding. There was none. Just the weight of it. Cool. Real. I didn't ask where it came from. I didn't have to. I fastened it to the corner of my badge, just above my name. Not because I needed people to notice, but because I finally did. Later that night, I found him on the rooftop. It wasn't planned. I'd gone up there just to breathe, to step away from the noise and the congratulations that didn't feel like they belonged to me. But there he was, leaning on the railing, coat unbuttoned, hair slightly wind-blown. The city stretched out behind him in amber lights and fog. I stood beside him for a moment before I spoke. "Why did you trust me?" I asked. He didn't turn right away. Then he said quietly, You reminded me of someone. Your daughter? He shook his head. No, me. That caught me off guard. He continued. Years ago, someone handed me a camera I wasn't qualified to use. Everyone else thought it was a mistake, but that one person, they saw something I didn't. And you believed them? No, he said. Not at first, but they believed in me long enough for it to become real. I looked down at the pin on my badge, the tiny feather catching rooftop light. Is that what you're doing with me? He nodded once. You don't owe me anything, Ellie, he said. But you have something worth building. I just didn't want to be the reason you buried it. We didn't say anything after that. The wind moved around us, cool against our sleeves. Somewhere below, a siren wailed and faded. He looked at me, not intensely, not searching, just there. Present in a way most people never learn to be. I met his gaze. No smile, no question. Just the kind of quiet that holds something safe between two people who know what it means to be unseen for too long. We didn't touch. We didn't have to. The room was warmer this time, not in temperature, but in something quieter expectation, maybe. Familiarity. This wasn't a launch event. This was community. Former patients, high school counselors, therapists, parents, people who didn't care about perfect edits or broadcast numbers. They just wanted to know someone was doing something that mattered. I stepped up to the mic. No screen behind me. Just a single slide with the words, Phoenix Archive, Phase 2, Speak Forward. I took a breath. My name is Ellie Ward, I began, and I used to believe healing meant forgetting, that to move forward you had to erase what happened. I looked across the room, at a girl near the front with a healing graft on her cheek, at a boy fidgeting with the strap of his backpack like he didn't know where to put his hands. But I don't believe that anymore, I said. I think healing means remembering without shame and giving that memory a place to breathe. I told them about Phase 2, mobile recording kits, voice coaching, community-led workshops, a way for survivors to tell their stories on their terms, in their words. Not perfect, not polished, just honest. And that, I told them, was enough. I paused before my final slide. It was blank. No words, no logos, just a faint, scanned pencil sketch from the archive. A face, half finished. Gentle eyes, one side shaded, the other open, raw. I stepped aside and spoke softly. This drawing was made by a girl who didn't want her picture taken. She didn't finish it. Said she didn't know how to draw her own face anymore. I placed my hand near the mic, steady now. Scars don't end stories, I said. They don't punctuate them with periods. I touched the corner of my cheek, where the faint ridge still lived. They're not the end. They're the pause, the breath. They're the ellipses. That means something is still unfolding. I looked out at the crowd, no longer afraid of what they saw. Let's make space, I said, for stories still being written. Then I stepped back and let the quiet do the rest. As the applause faded, my mind slipped, just for a second, back to that hallway, the elevator, the wrong button, the glass door with the words, Executive Studio, Private Sessions Only. I saw myself again, cardigan too big, safety pin shining under the light, clutching a folder like armor. I'd thought I was trespassing, that I'd walked into something I didn't deserve to witness. But now, standing here with a room full of people who chose to listen, I realized maybe that door hadn't been wrong at all. Maybe it had been waiting to open. They offered to bring me back on stage, to say a few more words, to pose for a photo, to hold a bouquet wrapped in cellophane and ribbon. I said no. Instead, I stepped down quietly and returned to my seat in the second row. As I sat, I glanced toward the back corner of the room where I knew he'd be. Marcus wasn't clapping. He didn't stand. He just looked at me. Not like a mentor. Not like a boss. Just a man who had once seen someone slip into the wrong room and decided not to send her away. Our eyes met for a breath. I gave the smallest smile. Nothing rehearsed. Nothing public. He nodded. That was it. No standing ovation, no speech, no grand gesture. Just a quiet exchange that said, "You didn't imagine it. You belonged here all along," and that was enough. Some lessons don't arrive like lightning. They come quietly, like the slow warmth of sun on skin after weeks of cold. I used to think stories needed to be big, loud, broadcast ready, with dramatic turning points and tidy resolutions. But the truth is, the moments that change you the most often happen in silence. In small rooms, in shared glances, in someone believing in you when you haven't quite learned to believe in yourself. I spent so long trying not to be noticed, trying to be low maintenance, easy, replaceable, like I didn't want to inconvenience the world with my presence. But looking back, what helped me grow wasn't learning to speak louder. It was learning to stop apologizing for existing. Because sometimes we mistake invisibility for safety. And sometimes it takes being seen, truly seen for the first time, to realize how much we've been hiding from ourselves. There's something strange that happens when someone sees potential in you before you do. It's terrifying, honestly. You start questioning everything. Why me? What did they see? Is it a fluke? Will they regret it? That kind of recognition doesn't feel like a gift. At first, it feels like pressure. Like you've been handed something fragile and you're terrified you'll drop it. But slowly, very slowly, you learn to hold it steady. I think about that girl I was on the first day. The one who tilted her head to hide a scar. Who ate in the supply closet because it felt easier than risking small talk. The one who thought slipping into the wrong room would get her fired or laughed at. I want to hug her, not because she was weak, but because she was so careful not to take up space she had already earned. And I want to say, you didn't imagine it. You didn't stumble your way in. You weren't a mistake. You were just early. For anyone watching this right now, if you've ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong, if you've ever shrunk yourself to fit other people's comfort, if you've ever thought, I'll be ready once I'm better, louder, braver, let me say what no one said to me soon enough. You don't need to be finished to be worth listening to. You don't need to be perfect to show up. You are allowed to bring your fear, your doubt, your questions to the table, and you are allowed to sit at that table, because real change rarely starts with the loudest voice. It usually begins with the quietest person in the room, finally deciding they're tired of being quiet for someone else's comfort. I won't pretend that things magically got easy after Phoenix Archive launched. They didn't. Some meetings still feel intimidating, some scars still catch me off guard, and yes, there are days I still wonder if I'm just the intern who got lucky. But then I remember something Marcus once said, not to me, but about me, when he didn't know I was listening. She doesn't need protection. She just needs a shot. And really, that's all any of us need. Not a rescue, not a shortcut, just a door we're allowed to open, and someone who doesn't slam it shut the moment we hesitate on the threshold. Now, every time I look at that little silver pin curved like a feather, small enough to lose if you weren't paying attention, I think of all the people I've met who carry stories they think are too quiet, too messy, too raw to be worth telling. I think of how many voices never get heard because we train people to polish their pain before it's allowed to be public. And I think, maybe we've had it backwards. Maybe the most powerful stories aren't the ones that impress us. Maybe they're the ones that reach us. So here's what I want to leave you with. Your voice matters. Even if it shakes. Even if it's slow. Even if it doesn't sound like anyone else's. Especially then. The scar under my eye hasn't disappeared. It probably never will. But I don't cover it anymore. Because it reminds me what I survived. And because it taught me something I hope you'll remember too. Scars aren't shameful. They're proof that you healed.